Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Arkham Horror Files. In this series, I pick one of the investigators from the Arkham Horror LCG and overview their investigator card, along with their signature cards. I'll also go over card choices and deck building strategies I think would work well with that investigator. In today's episode of the Arkham Horror Files, we will be entering the halls of the Arkham Sanitarium to further investigate Carolyn Fern, the Psychologist. While recently spoiled to be in the upcoming deluxe expansion, The Circle Undone, Carolyn made her first appearance to the Arkham Horror LCG with the release of the novella To Fight the Black Wind. Carolyn is a Guardian-class investigator with 3 willpower, 4 intellect, 2 might, and 2 agility. She has 6 health and 9 sanity, and bears the medic trait. Carolyn has a reaction ability that states, after one of your card effects heals horror from an investigator or ally asset, the healed card's controller gains 1 resource. And lastly, for the front half of her investigator card, her elder sign effect reads, +1. You may heal 1 horror from an investigator or ally asset at your location. Flipping to the back half of her investigator card, Carolyn has a deck size of 30, and her deck building options include Guardian cards levels 0 through 3, neutral cards levels 0 through 5, cards that heal horror levels 0 through 5, and up to 15 Seeker and or Mystic cards levels 0 through 1. Carolyn is required to include in her deck Hypnotic Therapy, Rational Thought, as well as 1 random basic weakness. These 3 cards do not count towards your deck size. Additionally, Carolyn is restricted from adding weapons levels 1 through 5 in her deck. Right away we can see Carolyn is not your typical Guardian investigator. Rather than picking up a shotgun and mowing down powerful enemies, Carolyn's strengths instead lie in her intellect and ability to empower fellow party members and their allies. While it is possible to play Carolyn solo, I believe she is best suited for games where there are 3 or 4 investigators. In games with larger player counts, you won't be so crunched for time trying to get everything in the scenario completed alone. More players also gives you more targets to heal horror from, as well as provide decent meat shields so you continue about your investigation. A measly 2 might and 2 agility will make dealing with foes difficult for Carolyn. If you need to fight enemies, you have out-of-class options like I've Got a Plan, Mind Over Matter, and Shriveling. Sporting a decent willpower allows Carolyn to take spells like the previously mentioned Shriveling, or Mists of Relie, to shore up weaknesses in her might and agility when dealing with enemies. Which of these options you decide to include in your deck will largely depend on the scenario or campaign you are playing. While other investigators are taking the brunt of the mythos, Carolyn should be focusing on keeping them sane while gathering up additional clues she may find along the way. Having access to Seeker cards like Shortcut and Pathfinder will make traversing the map easier so that you can spend your actions investigating and healing. As for recovering lost sanity, First Aid, Clarity of Mind, Logical Reasoning, and Thermos are all ways you can heal horror without having to reach into the Chaos Bag, or meet other conditions like Kerosene or the powerful Cheat Death. Along the same lines, St. Hubert's Key provides you with a boost to both willpower and intellect, and when it would be discarded, you heal 2 horror and also get a resource thanks to Carolyn's reaction ability. These are not the only cards Carolyn has access to in order to trigger her reaction ability. Spoiled in the same article as her investigator card, the first of Carolyn's signature cards is Hypnotic Therapy. This card is a 2-cost asset bearing 1 willpower, 1 intellect, and 1 wild skill icon, as well as the talent trait. The first ability of this card is an action that reads, Exhaust Hypnotic Therapy. Test Intellect 2. If you succeed, heal 1 horror from an investigator at your location. Then, that investigator may draw 1 card. This card also has a reaction ability that states, after one of your card effects heals horror from an investigator, exhaust Hypnotic Therapy. That effect heals 1 additional horror. This card truly feels like Carolyn's signature card. The action upon succeeding provides a draw, a resource, and the healing of horror. Boosting your intellect with cards like Alice Luxley or Dr. Mylan Christopher should make succeeding this test a simple chore. It is quickly worth noting that you have to exhaust Hypnotic Therapy as a part of the cost of using the action, meaning that you can only activate it once a turn. The reaction ability provides your healing an additional boost if need be, and another way to exhaust this card if you don't have the actions to spend undergoing hypnotherapy. The skill icons on this card also provide a nice boost to this card's stock as well. Overall, I really like this card for Carolyn, and the art is fantastic. FFG, if you're listening, we want this art on a playmat. Please. Carolyn's other signature card is Foolishness, Foolish Cat of Ulthar. This card is a 4-cost asset with 2 wild skill icons. It bears the ally, creature, and dreamlands traits. He has 1 health and 4 sanity. Foolishness takes up the ally slot and has a passive ability that reads, Foolishness enters play with 3 horror on him. Horror on him may be healed as if it were on Carolyn Fern. While Foolishness has no horror on him, you get +1 to all skills. This replacement asset is certainly interesting. It creates a minigame of sorts where you look to heal the horror off of Foolishness in order to get a buff to your stats. You can use Fearless in tandem with Liquid Courage to heal all 3 horror with a single skill test. Doing that, however, still costs 3 actions, 3 cards, 5 resources, and actually succeeding the skill test for a +1 buff to your stats. While the reward is nice, you'll be dedicating a lot of time and resources trying to make this work. Foolishness taking up your ally slot is something else to consider when choosing to add this asset to your deck. With 2 wild skill icons, it is at worst an extra copy of Unexpected Courage. While I like the design and the art of this card, in most cases I'd prefer having Hypnotic Therapy over this card. Carolyn's signature weakness is Rational Thought. This card has 2 abilities, the first of which states, Revelation. Put Rational Thought into play into your threat area, with 4 horror on it. Horror on Rational Thought may be healed as if it were on Carolyn Fern. If no horror is on Rational Thought, discard it. Lastly, there is a passive ability that reads, You cannot heal horror from cards other than Rational Thought. You cannot gain resources from Carolyn Fern's reaction ability. This card is similar to Foolishness, except there's no reward for removing all the horror from it. Having to heal 4 horror rather than 3 is not something to be overlooked either. Most cards that heal horror only have 3 uses, Clarity of Mind and First Aid, for example. This means you'll have to commit another card and/or action in order to be able to get rid of this card. As Carolyn, you'll already want to have cards that heal horror in your deck. This weakness, if drawn, spreads those effects out thin, and can render cards like Cheat Death inert. In some cases, this isn't too bad. While it does slow down your resource production, the worst thing it takes away from you is both choice and time. Over the course of a campaign, it's hard to say if this weakness will have a lasting effect when compared to something like Smite the Wicked or Searching for Izzy. Carolyn's replacement weakness, To Fight the Black Wind, is a weakness card with the Task and Dreamlands traits. Its first effect reads, Revelation. Attach to Fight the Black Wind to the current agenda. Carolyn Fern takes 1 direct horror. The second effect on this card states, Forced. At the end of the round, if any amount of horror was assigned to an investigator this round and it was not healed, place 1 doom on attached agenda. This weakness, in my opinion, feels like one of the most mild weaknesses in the game. The forced effect varies wildly from scenario to scenario, sometimes having chances to trigger on a turn-by-turn basis, and in other scenarios you can coast through without much of a problem. This variance in how this weakness plays out is limited a bit in solo, however, where it is more likely Carolyn will be engaged in combat at some point. One last thing to point out about this card is that there's actually no way of getting rid of this card other than the agenda advancing, which can also play a role in the variance of the severity in this card. In solo play, I can see adding this card to my deck to include Foolishness for the extra wild skill icons, but aside from that, I doubt this will be in Carolyn decks moving forward. While Carolyn partners well with just about any investigator, there are a few in particular that synergize well with the Psychologist. Agnes Baker loves partnering up with Carolyn. Agnes can freely use cards like Forbidden Knowledge and Painkillers to trigger her reaction ability to get free damage onto enemies, and Carolyn can be there to wipe the horror off of Agnes while also giving her additional resources. Finn Edwards, having a willpower of 1, will likely be taking horror from cards like Rotting Remains, and Carolyn can be there to remove the horror while also helping him discover clues. If you're building a deck for solo play, foregoing the nonsense of companionship, one card I suggest is Stick to the Plan. Testing the upper limits of her Guardian capabilities, this card gives Carolyn access to a small toolbox of cards that she can use to fight off any enemies she is forced to deal with. Shortcut, Emergency Cast, and I've Got a Plan are great cards to have consistently when you need them, while also minimizing the chances of drawing them when you don't. If you've got a plan, you might as well stick to it. Carolyn is Arkham Horror's first healer-type investigator. Her abilities center around generating resources, healing horror, and drawing cards, all of which aren't mechanics that in and of themselves win scenarios. Carolyn can, however, gather clues well, but struggles to deal with enemies. These traits make Carolyn well suited for filling a support role in your 3 or 4 player game. As a solo investigator, Carolyn will be an interesting challenge facing the Mythos. With her release coming soon in the Circle Undone, I'm excited to try Carolyn and her new signature cards out. I want to hear from you though. Are you excited to try Carolyn out, or have you already? Have you tried playing her in a solo game? I know Innkeeper Vase Odin from the channel The Twisted Tentacle Inn has, and if you want to check that video out, I've put a link down in the description. If you like this video, don't forget to press that thumbs up button, and if you have friends that also like the Arkham Horror LCG, share this video with them. Real quick before I sign off, I plan on doing a giveaway when I reach 100 subscribers, so stay tuned for that. If you want to stay up to date when my videos go live, hit the subscribe button and become one of the many who are lost in time and space. In the next video, we will be discussing yet another new investigator from the Circle Undone, Reedy Young, Miskatonic University's star athlete. Until then, thank you all very much for watching, and have a great day.